I remember thinking, man, I could really do anything I wanted here to any of these people and get away with it. And that was why I was so worried that, because Major Price tried to put me on an interrogation team because I am an analyst and I have a top secret clearance. And he wanted me to be on one of the Tiger teams. And I refused because I knew I didn't know if I could trust myself in that situation. And to be a part of this, these interrogations where anything can happen. And to have, somebody like one of these civilians running the show, and then I'm being told that I need to do this because if I don't, soldiers are going to lose their lives. And that's what's even worse, is doing these kinds of things with the idea that what you're doing is right. That you're doing the right thing. That this is your way of fighting the war and winning the war on terror. And there's no way I was going to allow myself, if I could help it, to be put into that situation. And so I refused. One day I was at work and I found out that one of my soldiers that was under me in my targeting section during the war was a subject matter expert of this Iraqi general. I volunteered to be his analyst as well as his security for the interrogation because I knew him and he's very mild-mannered, and I knew I could trust him not to be an animal or to do something out of his league. And I wanted to see what it was like, it's an Iraqi general. It's not every day that something like that happens. He came back saying, they told me that they already broke the general, and but now they're offering me his son to interview. And I'm like, what's his son doing here? Why is his son here? He's just a kid, and he's weak, he's frail. And I'm thinking, man, they're gonna tear him up in this general population because, by then the MPs had already, I'd already found out that, a lot of the prisoners in the general population were, raping one another and whatnot. There's just like no order, they didn't really know what all was going on in there. And I'm thinking, this he's gonna get raped probably repeatedly. He's gonna be somebody's pet. And I went back in to the JITIC and I'm like, you got to get this kid out of the general population. Do you realize there's a kid in the general population? They're like, well, 16 and older goes general population. And I'm like, that's crazy. It's like he's going to get raped in there. But nobody cared. They just looked at the policy, 16 and older, general population. What happens, happens. And that was it. And he even said his brother was there because he was wondering where his brother was. And I was like, my God, we took the whole damn family. I'm like, how many times has this happened? There were so many people there that were doing jobs that they were never trained for, but yet it's a very important, very responsible job, to include myself. People do interrogations that weren't interrogators, people doing analysis that weren't analysts, completely inexperienced. When the civilians came, and especially the people from Guantanamo Bay, it was like, our saviors, these are the guys that know what they're doing. and they took that lead, being so young, not so far out of high school even, and here they are in Iraq, interrogating people, and doing all these things to people, and how are they going to come away from this? Because I could already see, what kind of person they were becoming. It was just, like it was just a big game, and that these weren't real lives that they were handling. You're getting shot at, you're getting mortared, people shooting rockets over the wall. Anybody can just drive up and pull a mortar out of their trunk of their car and start lobbing them over the wall. But you would still think there would be some kind of security, established to keep all the danger away. And every single time we got mortared, detainees were killed because they all had them penned up in these mud pits, in the middle of just totally open space, completely unprotected. Most times we got mortared, detainees were wounded and killed, and sometimes en masse. And the first night I was there, that happened. There was like 29 detainees were killed and wounded. Geneva Convention was never in anybody's mind. And as if soldiers have a pocket Geneva Convention book, so they as if anybody even knows what the Geneva Convention really is. They just assume they know, but nobody knows. Nobody's read it. It's not posted somewhere and forced. You're forced to recite it or something. Nobody knows the Geneva Conventions. Everybody, even civilians. Everybody talks about Geneva Conventions like they know what they are. But nobody knows the Geneva Conventions. You just assume they do. Which to me is kind of telling, because they're using their own sense of right and wrong as to what the Geneva Conventions are and what they aren't. After 9/11, all bets were off. Nobody's thinking Geneva Convention anymore. And nobody at Abu Ghraib was discussing that. And we assumed it was another extension of Afghanistan. I mean, as a matter of fact, the unit that was there just came in from Afghanistan, using the same equipment. And then they even brought in this group from Guantanamo Bay to make things run better. There's nobody that was at that prison that can say they were shocked by those pictures. Everybody knew a little bit of something about what was going on behind closed doors. And the MPs weren't like, a world to their own. They were, the tools of us, the MI guys, the military intelligence. Anything they did was, unless it had to do with their security of the prison, but I mean, as far as interrogations are concerned, they weren't going it on their own. Not that they were doing exactly what they were told, but that was based on other things that they were already being made to do to the prisoners. To me, it's ridiculous to think that it was just these MPs on just this time, and that there's nothing more to it, like as if the rest of the operation was professional and ethical and legal. But I think things just started taking a life of their own, perhaps, with some of these MPs. I mean, like putting people in pyramids and all this other stuff. Whether or not it was a part of an interrogation doesn't matter, but I would say it was inspired by what they were already doing. Like General Sanchez, how he worded his approval of techniques, saying, I will approve, I approve of this if the local commander approves of it. So when the local commander, who was Colonel Pappas, approved of it, and there was a problem, which there was, he can say, well, legally I didn't, specifically I didn't approve of this technique. That's what's happened, with these MPs. They tell them it's okay I want you to do this, I want you to do that, or, I don't care if you do this, I don't care if you do that. But because they're the ones getting their hands dirty, they're the ones actually doing it, if there's a problem, they're going to be the ones who take the fall. People that get in trouble are the people they want in trouble.
Just returning to the MP pictures for a moment. What function did they serve in this story?
That, I would say, are soldiers taking pictures at work. I mean, it's quite obvious they were comfortable doing what they were doing, that they didn't think that what they were doing was wrong. And they were just documenting their Iraq experience, like everybody else does.
So they were not unique in any way in that respect. Everybody was taking pictures.
Right. It actually became a point of frustration for me because it's like nobody could do anything without taking a picture of it first. I mean, first it was disposable cameras, and they're everywhere. I mean, we're like, we're crossing the border, going into Iraq, waiting for guns to start firing, and people are just, just taking pictures of everything. No matter where we went, no matter what we're doing, somebody's taking pictures. It's just ridiculous. I'm like, this is a war, people. And then the digital cameras started getting mailed in, and then that was a whole nother, made it even worse, because then you can take more pictures, and then you can look at the pictures, and then they buy a laptop where they can put the pictures on, and then look at them on a slideshow. In January, when the investigation began, CID had people come in groups to the little office that they had set up at the prison, and you had to fill out a generic questionnaire, which were questions like, do you know of any abuse of detainees? Do you know of anything about photographs of detainees? Very vague, but it's clear. It's a clear yes or no answer. And if you just said no to all of them, then they wouldn't bother you, which is kind of convenient, But for those of us like myself that said yes, they would call you back. But they would do that days later. And it would be, everybody would know that they were calling you back. And that would basically tip them off that either you're in trouble or you're telling on somebody that's in trouble. They're one of the bad guys or you're one of the people letting them know about the bad guys.
This is before the amnesty box.
I don't know anything about an amnesty box.
I heard that they had an order that they were supposed to throw away all at a certain point.
Well, I was ordered to, there was photographs on the common drive, and I was ordered to wipe them all out. I was ordered to wipe out all multimedia files from the shared drive. That happened with me, but I don't know anything about an amnesty box.
When did that happen?
That happened in January, shortly after the investigation started. There was actually 2 shared drives, and one was just a backup to the other. And when we converted the power from 110 to 220, we fried the power supply to the backup. So we had to take that hard drive out and put it in a shelf inside the T-skiff until they could bring another computer. And I left with it still sitting in the closet I've always wondered whatever happened to that hard drive. The Army doesn't care who did what or who's really responsible. What the Army cares is that it can save face. And by saying it's just a few bad apples and saying it was only these few acts at these few times, does that perfectly. And at the same time, it keeps what's hidden or unknown hidden and unknown. So nobody's digging elsewhere where they don't want them to dig. Because like the whole investigation is like nothing but filler. They release just thousands of useless paperwork. So anybody trying to sift through this is going to have to spend a lot of time and energy to find something. And then even if they find it, they might not know what they've really found because there's so much other bullshit. The pictures serve as the perfect misdirection. It's like political magic. Putting all the attention in this one area as if there is no other area to be paid attention to. That's all there is. There's nowhere else to look. It's like a magic trick, like sleight of hand. Look over here while I'm doing this, while I'm doing this over here. So when people are thinking about Abu Ghraib, or they want something to be done about Abu Ghraib, they're only working within the framework of mind that's been provided them, which is it's only a few bad apples. So when they talk about abuse or they talk about torture, they think that all they're talking about is what's in these photographs, and it's only these MPs.